The morning she arrived, the sky was the color of dishwater, and the wind carried the smell of broken promises. Silas McCrae stood on the porch with his arms folded, boots planted wide on the old wood, as the wagon creaked up his dusty trail. The mule pulling it looked as tired as the woman perched beside the driver, a slight figure wrapped in a threadbare shawl, her shoulders set with quiet defiance. A little girl sat beside her, no older than 3, clutching a burlap doll missing an eye. Silas hadn't ordered a family. He put out a notice for a cook. The wagon halted, and Clara Bellamy climbed down without waiting for help. Her boots hit the dirt like a challenge. She turned, lifting her daughter into her arms, then stood there, spine straight, waiting. Silas saw the edge in her eyes, something raw but held together by pride. He didn't care for pride. Not anymore. "You Clara?" he asked, voice like gravel. She nodded. "I can cook. Wash, too. Daisy stays with me." He looked at the child. Pale, thin, quiet. Not even a blink. He grunted. "You'll sleep in the lean-to behind the kitchen. Meals start before sunup. Don't expect talk." Clara didn't flinch. "Don't expect thanks." That evening, Silas pushed open his front door and paused. The house smelled different. Warm. Something buttery and sharp. Cornbread and stew. The kind his late wife used to make before the baby came too early and bled her out by lantern light. He swallowed hard, sat alone at the table, and ate every bite. Didn't say a word when he scraped the bowl clean. The next morning, he found the girl on his porch, squatting in the cold with a flower clutched in her hand. Just a weed, really, some wild sprig with purple fray. She held it out. Silas stared at it. At her. She looked up at him with the wide-eyed silence of children who've learned already not to speak unless spoken to. He turned and went inside. Clara walked the mile to town every third day for flour and salt. The general store clerk didn't like her. Made her wait. Spoke over her. One morning, Silas happened to be there. Watched her from across the shelves as she stood with her arms full, Daisy tugging at her skirt. A sack of beans dropped and scattered at her feet. No one helped. He paid for his nails and left first. That evening, she returned to the ranch barefoot. Her shoes split, soaked from a creek crossing. Silas saw her limp as she passed his window. The next morning, a pair of old boots stood by her door. Sturdy, if a little worn. She never mentioned them, but he noticed the limp disappeared. At night, after the chores were done and Daisy was asleep on a pile of quilts, Clara would sit in the kitchen and mend things. A frayed curtain, a split cuff, the hem of Silas's flannel shirts when she thought he wasn't looking. She moved with purpose, her silence never passive. There was something hard-won in the way she swept or stirred or scraped pans, a life lived scraping. One stormy evening, Silas found her in the attic. He'd heard the footsteps and thought it was a raccoon. Instead, there she was, kneeling beside a dusty trunk. In her lap lay a fiddle, strings warped with time. "It was hers," he said flatly from the doorway. Clara looked up. "It still holds a tune." She didn't ask permission, just lifted the bow and played. The notes were shaky at first, then stronger, truer. A simple hymn, drawn out like a breath held too long. He didn't move from the doorway. Didn't know why, only that something in the sound scratched at a place in him he thought was sealed. The following days passed in a rhythm not unlike music. Daisy followed Silas to the barn sometimes. She liked the cows, especially the one with a bent horn. Silas began leaving the stall doors unlatched, so she could peek inside. Once, he caught her patting the mare's nose with that same cautious reverence children offer saints. Clara cooked, cleaned, and never asked for more than what had been agreed. She didn't flirt, didn't pry. But sometimes at the end of long days, when the kitchen lantern glowed gold and the outside world shrunk to the warmth of shared space, Silas caught himself watching her hands. The way they moved, capable, unhurried, tender when she thought no one was looking. She reminded him of someone who'd been forgotten too long. In town, whispers bloomed like weeds. Fat Silas hired himself a stray woman. Can't even keep house without help now. Clara heard it. Her chin rose higher each time. On market day, the preacher's wife looked her up and down. "Is that your husband?" she asked, meaning Silas. "No, ma'am," Clara said with quiet steel. He's the man who lets me work. That's more than most. When word reached Silas, he didn't say a thing. But that night, the cornbread was cooked in a proper cast-iron pan, and there were blackberries folded into it. He said, "That yours?" She shrugged. Daisy found the bush near the fence. He nodded once. The closest thing to praise he gave. One night, Daisy took ill. Fever burning, eyes glassy, skin hot enough to singe. Clara was frantic, wet cloths, whispered prayers. Silas saw the fear and felt it bloom in his chest like wildfire. Without a word, he saddled up and rode to town, banged on the doctor's door with such force it cracked the frame. They rode back together, and by dawn, Daisy's fever broke. Clara never said thank you. Silas never asked for it. Later that week, he returned to the barn to find Daisy asleep in the hay, Clara beside her, watching the rafters with eyes rimmed red from exhaustion. Silas stood there for a long while before stepping back out into the dusk. He didn't know what he was feeling, only that something inside him had shifted, like a beam once cracked, now bearing weight again. And still he said nothing. But the next night, as Clara played the fiddle by the fire, Daisy cradled in her lap. Silas sat on the porch step. The notes drifted through the wood and dusk, like they had somewhere to go. He didn't speak. He just listened. And the girl, for the first time, stood up, toddled out, and laid her head against his arm. Silas froze, didn't move, didn't breathe. She stayed there, and he let her. He never meant to fall for her. But something in him was already beginning to break. The storm came hard out of the northwest, a wall of black pushing dusk in early. Wind slammed into the hills like a drunken giant, peeling shingles, tearing shirts from lines. Silas barely had time to see the clouds before the horses screamed and the fence came down like matchsticks. He grabbed his hat, his rifle, and ran without a word. Clara caught him by the arm on the porch. "You'll get yourself killed," she said, her hair loose, her apron already soaked. "There's calves out there, and a bull that don't scare easy. You don't owe us anything, Silas." He paused, eyes on the horizon. "Maybe not, but you're here now." And he was gone, swallowed by rain and dust. The storm raged through the night, thundering like judgment. Clara waited with Daisy curled on her lap, the lantern lit low, heart jumping at every creak. Hours passed. The wind died, but he did not return. When he stumbled in near dawn, soaked, limping, bloodied at the brow, Clara nearly dropped the ladle in her hand. His coat was torn and his side was wrapped tight with his own shirt. "Ribs," he muttered. "Bull clipped me." She helped him to the chair, her hands trembling despite her calm. Why do something so foolish? Silas looked at her, truly looked. "Because I lost one girl already. I ain't losing another." For the first time since arriving, Clara turned away to hide her face. By midday, the fence was half standing again, and Silas was flat on his bed, fevered and cursing softly. Clara boiled willow bark and sponged his head. She spoke little, but he could feel her presence, solid, unflinching. The way she pressed her palm against his chest to check his breath. The way she tucked Daisy beside him when the girl insisted on staying close. The town preacher came 2 days later, summoned by gossip or God. Hard to say which. He stood on the porch, hat in hand, glancing past Clara toward the barn, then the house. "I mean no offense," he said, "but folks are talking. A woman under a man's roof without a name to it. Well, it ain't proper." Clara folded her arms, chin lifting slightly. "We're not asking for charity, Reverend. I didn't say you were." He shifted, uncomfortable. "Just think of your daughter." Clara nodded once. "I always do." When she turned, Silas was there behind the screen door, pale but upright. He'd heard enough. The preacher looked at him, opened his mouth, then thought better of it. That night, Clara began packing. Neatly, quietly. Folded her dresses, wrapped Daisy's doll in a towel. She said nothing, but Silas saw the suitcase by the door and felt something inside him go cold. "You leaving?" he asked, voice low. She didn't look at him. "I won't bring shame to your house. The town's already made up its mind." Silas took a long breath. "You didn't ask for anything." "No, but I've taken it anyway. Peace, shelter, kindness. You earned every bit." She touched the doorframe. the wood worn smooth by years of hands and time. Not in their eyes. Silas didn't argue. He didn't plead, just turned and walked out into the barn. There, in the dark, he picked up a hammer, then put it down. He stood in the stall where Daisy liked to hide and let the smell of hay and horse and rain damp would sink into his skin. His ribs ached, but something else did too, deeper, older. A wound with no name. He didn't sleep that night, and when he heard Daisy crying, he climbed the stairs slow as thunder, found Clara rocking her gently, whispering nothings. Silas knelt beside the bed, took Daisy's hand. "Don't go," he whispered. "Please. I ain't been much of a man, but I know what losing feels like." Clara stared at him, stunned into stillness. "I never asked for more," he said, voice cracked. "But you gave it anyway. Quietly. Every day. I see it now." She said nothing. But in the morning, the suitcase was still by the door, unmoved. In the days that followed, Silas rose with effort, walked the fields again, slower than before. And one morning, Clara found him bent over a patch of dirt behind the barn, planting marigolds, beans, something that looked like wild carrots. "For Daisy," he said. "She should have something of her own." Clara knelt beside him, took the spade from his hands. They worked in silence, shoulder to shoulder. In the kitchen, he asked her to show him how to roll pie crust. He was clumsy, flour on his nose, and she laughed, startled by the sound of it coming from her own mouth. Their hands touched. He didn't pull away. And when the town whispered again, louder this time, Silas stood straighter. Rode into town with Clara and Daisy, nodded at the clerk, ignored the glares. When someone muttered "stray woman," he said loud enough for all to hear, "She's the reason this ranch still stands." They left in silence behind him. Then one dry afternoon, a fine carriage pulled up the lane, kicking dust over the garden beds. A woman stepped out, fine clothes, curled hair, the mirror of Clara in a colder light. Clara stood frozen. "Anna," she breathed. Her younger sister gave a tight smile. "Well, I didn't expect dirt under your nails. I didn't expect you at all." Anna looked past her, eyes landing on Daisy. "You named her after Mama?" "No," Clara said softly. "After Hope. I'm here because your merchant husband left you, didn't he?" Clara said. Anna stiffened. "He's gone. But you were always the plain one, Clara. I did you a favor." Silas stepped onto the porch then, arms crossed. "You don't get to speak to her like that. Not on my land." Anna blinked, caught off guard. "And who are you to her?" He looked at Clara, then at the little girl gripping her mother's skirts. "I hired a cook," he said slowly. "But I got a mother for my home. A woman who's braver than I ever was. If she leaves now, I won't stop her. But if she stays, there's a place for her here. For both of them. No promises. Just truth." Anna's face fell. She stepped back, swallowed by silence. Clara reached down and took Daisy's hand. Her fingers trembled. Later, as the sun dipped low and the light turned copper across the fields, Silas sat on the porch, fiddle in his lap. He didn't know how to play, but he held it, cradled it like memory. Inside, Clara peeled apples, slow and steady, the scent of cinnamon and sugar curling through the windows. Daisy laughed, clear, bright. It was a sound Silas never thought he'd hear again. And when Clara stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron, she paused beside him. Didn't sit, just stood long enough for her shadow to touch his boots. "I was never meant to stay," she said. Silas looked up at her. "Then why haven't you gone?" She didn't answer, but she reached down, took the fiddle from his lap, and played the same song she did that first night. Only this time, she wasn't trembling, and he wasn't listening alone.